All right, this week on the podcast, I'm joined by Alison DeFlumeri of Immortalata Functional Nutrition. Just finished up a great conversation. She's super passionate about what she does. We have a great conversation about exactly what functional nutrition is. Talk about diet, we talk about hormones, talk about all kinds of different stuff. And if you're thinking about making some healthy changes in your life, I think you'd really enjoy what she has to say. So thanks for listening. This is the Randy Forcier podcast. If you do me a favor and subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple, would really appreciate that. I appreciate the support. Here's Allison. Hey, Allison, how you doing?
How are you? I'm so excited to be here today. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm excited too. Very, very excited. Had a recent experience with you and your company. I'm excited to have you on the podcast to talk about what you do. I think you're super passionate, plenty of energy, and you do good work. So what I was hoping to do was dig into what you do for work. You have a company called Immortalata Functional Nutrition. Tell me about what got you started, background. Let me know.
Okay, yeah, I'm so glad you enjoyed your experience with us. I can't wait to chat about that in a bit. Yeah. But yeah, let's give you the origin story. I think that's always important. So I think with any business or business owner, when you have a passion for something, it's because you've had a true and intimate, a meaningful experience with that passion. And I am no different. My passion for functional nutrition and functional medicine really stemmed out of a very, very personal and difficult experience for me. You look at me today and I am happy and healthy and vibrant. Like you said, like you have a lot of energy. And that was not always the case. I was very, very ill for a large portion of my life. From a very young age, about like second grade, I was obese. And I'm fortunate enough now to have an understanding of the chemistry, genetics, epigenetics, and factors that like got me there. But most people don't have those tools in their tool belt. And as I continued through the lifespan, I was in an accident and found myself wheelchair bound and on crutches for 2 years. So that immobility ballooned my weight to a state of morbid obesity pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And in that, I became very depressed, very anxious, in part because of my diet. And that was not something that I had put together at the time. And we'll kind of dig into that as I go. And I found myself covered in cystic acne, hormonal acne, and that really started to kind of deteriorate me. And so the Western medicine model is, hey, okay, here's birth control for the hormone issues and the weight and the acne. Hey, here's an antidepressant for your depression. Here's an anti-anxiety med. And here's a long-term antibiotic for your acne. So all of a sudden, as an adolescent, I'm on this cocktail of pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
And the depression and anxiety escalated. And I now understand the chemistry behind that and how some of these pharmaceuticals were actually negatively impacting those outcomes for me. But I can remember so vividly looking at my mom, who had watched me suffer for so long, and looking at her and just saying, like, Mom, this is not working. This isn't life. There's a difference between like living and surviving, and I'm barely surviving. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to live like this. This isn't a life. And I think, we push on and we keep going in this life for the people that we love. And so I pushed, I kept going. I went to undergrad and really found that passion at the University of New England for the human body. Like I found myself in A&P and gross anatomies and like digging into that biochem, that kind of first step. And I started kind of putting together that, what we put in our bodies really impacted the control we had over it. And so I started to change some things, but I was still pretty sick. And I, passed undergrad and found myself really struggling. Everything I ate was really painful. I was still pretty heavy. My skin was really terrible, even in my early 20s. And I got the fortune to work with a functional nurse practitioner. Her name was Allison Gray. I believe she's still in practice in Scarborough. Mm-hmm. And I don't even know that she knows the impact she had on my life. But she was the first person to sit me down and be like, hey, you have control over your body. Like your body has this innate ability to heal itself let's give it the right set of instructions. Let's look at diet. Let's look at lifestyle. Let's look at all of these factors. And come to find out, I had a severe bacterial issue in my gut caused by the long-term antibiotics. I had a significant hormonal issue that was not going to be, quote, like beaten with diet and exercise alone.
It wasn't going to fix itself. Like you had to make changes. Or get treatment for it or something like that.
Something. And so often, and I see this in my patient cases a lot, you're told like diet, exercise, it's a you problem. There are so many pieces of chemistry that you're not going to beat with diet and exercise. That prescription is not going to give you a result. And so many people try that and don't see a result, and they get frustrated and they think it's a them problem, and it's not. There's a piece of chemistry working against them.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate enough, I got off every single pharmaceutical. And now you see the woman before you that is excited to be alive, that is happy, that is thriving, and that gets to make these meaningful changes for people every single day.
All right. I just wanted to take 1 second from the podcast to let you know that besides hosting, I also do mortgages. I'm a residential loan officer with Norcom Mortgage in Saco, Maine. If you or anyone you know is thinking about buying a home in 2024 or refinancing as rates are coming down, please feel free to reach out to me and I'd be happy to help. My contact information is in the description below. Thanks, and back to the pod.
And I get to watch these incredible metamorphoses in people.
Yeah. So when you were in undergrad, did you think that you were going to do what you're doing now, or it wasn't until you met Allison and had that experience that you're like, I could see myself doing this for other people?
Yeah. So undergrad, I was actually set up to be an occupational therapist, and realized pretty quickly that the interest was in the chemistry. The interest was in the biochem. How can I manipulate the body's chemistry to work better? How can I truly regress and reverse disease? How can I truly make a significant difference versus band-aiding a symptom or quote unquote, like kind of following the stereotypical Western medical model?
Nice. So you saw some improvements in yourself around that time, and tell me about the rest from there.
So I passed my master's board with the University of Bridgeport. I opened this practice actually during COVID. So 2020, everything was shut down, and I started, I literally started in a back office of a 1-bedroom loft, just solely doing telehealth.
Yep.
And over a 3-year period have built this up to a point where we're in our own clinic space. I have multiple clinicians under this roof. We treat all across the U.S. in person via telehealth. I'm fortunate enough to be located in the lower level of the Lincoln. So people fly here, they stay at the Lincoln, they come see me, they have their initial visit. And I think what is different is the approach that we take. So when I built the culture of Immortalata, I had been on the other side of the bench, right? I've been both a clinician and a patient. And I decided very quickly that I wasn't going to build this into a business model. This is not a sick care system like a lot of systems in the US are. This is a healthcare system. My goal by the time a patient leaves is to give them the tools to be well for the rest of their life. It's a terrible business model. It's terrible.
Yeah, it's not. But it's refreshing to hear, because I think of other businesses where the goal is to get them in the door, and then they are always coming in the door, and there's always some expense associated with that. Yes, does it mean you always need to have new clients? Yes, but like it is nice to be able to give the people the tools they need to take care of themselves. So in that sense, it's probably fulfilling.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I get to say, hey, you're no longer diabetic. Hey, you're no longer hypertensive. Hey, congratulations on losing 20, 30, 50, 80, 100 pounds. Hey, we've gotten you off all these medications. Congratulations. Hey, you no longer have an autoimmune disease. Congratulations. Like, those days are what fill my cup. And after they're discharged, I might get a hug and a Christmas card, but they have the tools they need to be well for the rest of their life. And that for me is super fulfilling. And I think from a spiritual perspective, at the end of the day, I get to be that servant for the greater good. And that's what we're meant to do. That's what we're meant to be here for.
Talk to me about the name. I know there's actually a great meaning behind the name Immortalata. You told me a story. I want to hear it again.
Okay. Love it. Love it. So I have a wonderful grandmother, my Nona. We are a heavy Sicilian family, and I was trying to explain to her what I do, why I was in school for so long. She couldn't quite wrap her head around like why her grandchild had been in school for so long. And I was trying to explain this to her, what I was doing and trying to regress, reverse, prevent disease in people. And she looked at me kind of in a kind of inquisitive way. And she said, so you're trying to make immortal people?
Yeah.
And I was like, sort of, like not really, but sort of, Nona. And she speaks broken Italian here and there. And she said to me, my beautiful immortal female, and the word for immortal is immortalate. And when you feminize that, like a lot of Romance languages do, you get immortalata. And it was just a play off this Sicilian word immortal that came to me as my Nona was trying to really wrap her head around what I was doing versus kind of the standard medical model.
Yeah. It's cool to have a combination of a name that actually fits what you do pretty well, but also have the family connection to it as well. And the name sticks out for sure. People see it and they remember it. So I think it's an awesome name.
Thanks so much. I think it's definitely a double take. Like it's difficult to pronounce, but I think people started to just kind of associate myself and Mayara and Natalie and what she does here with the name. And that's great. Like I wouldn't change it for the world.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And when you combine it with like your space, there's a certain feeling when you go into your space. It's clean, it's nice, it's well decorated, and the name is very classy, and it all kind of fits together. And you have this good vibe about what it is that you do for people. So I think it's perfect.
Thanks so much. When I built this space, and when I could have put the quote unquote aesthetic together, I wanted it to feel luxurious. I wanted it to feel like you were truly taking care of your body. I think so often when we associate going to a nutritionist, we kind of think, okay, they're going to tell us what to eat. Diet is not just what you eat. Mm-hmm. Diet is, yes, what you're ingesting, but also what you're exposing yourself to, whether that's toxins, whether that's what you're reading, that's what you're seeing, that's what you're watching, that's what you're listening to. All of that is diet, because the chemistry that goes on in your head between what you're hearing and reading and seeing will have matching chemistry that happens in your body. So when I'm working with a patient, like, yes, of course, I'm looking at what they're eating every day, but I'm also looking at what they're exposing themselves to, the toxins in the environment, or the people they surround themselves with, or how they speak to themselves, or the things that they're listening to. And I think so often kind of in the Western medicine model, we forget that all of those pieces encompass diet, not just the food we put in.
So this is a good time to bring up the idea of what functional nutrition is versus what people generally think nutrition is. And I think you just touched on part of it, but there's probably more to it than that. How do you describe it to people beyond what you just said on the diet piece?
Yeah, I think I'm going to like tread a little bit lightly here. So there's general nutritionists, there's dietitians, and then there's functional clinicians. And we can arrange anywhere from like a nutritionist to like a functional MD. And I think when we look at dietitians and general nutritionists, we're looking at maintaining, right? Maintaining a disease or disorder, trying to prevent it from progressing, right? We're also following in those industries, big pharma, big food, governmental industries that are dictating the regulated daily allowances of a given food. And there can be some trouble spots there in my mind. We're not listening 100% of the time to chemistry. We're looking at what is being recommended to us kind of in general, kind of for the masses. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Whereas in functional med, any bracket of functional med, whether you're looking at, functional nutrition all the way up to regenerative and restorative medicines, you're really looking at an individual's biochemistry and how to support their individual being to regress and reverse the disease. So, what you've been exposed through out the lifespan, whether that's trauma, stress, toxins, molds, we can kind of like go through the gamut. All of these things are what we call epigenetic factors. They turn genes on and off, which is why, you can have identical twins that have completely different sets of health based on exposures, right? Yep. And so we're taking these genetic and epigenetic factors into consideration, as well as understanding nutrient deficiencies, issues with maldigestion, malabsorption, kind of a deeper dive into what's going on in that individual, not just physically, but mentally. Because again, what goes on cognitively has this matching chemistry in the body. Like you can't be sad and depressed and have happy chemicals in your GI. Like those two things don't happen. If you're stressed in your mind, you're going to be making matching stress hormone in your body. You're going to make that matching cortisol. So we're kind of looking at both pieces, and all of those pieces that I talked about encompassing diet. It's far beyond just food. We use food as medicine, which is great. Yeah. But we also want to look at all of those other factors kind of contributing. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Cool.
And one of the things through personal experience, and I'm happy to talk about my personal experience with you at any time, but one of the things that struck me was just like that whole intake process. So like all the questions that you run through with people, and maybe some nutritionists do this or dietitians do this, but like all the questions were it was just more than just food related things. It was just like questions I probably hadn't even really thought of before in my life. And then there's a whole level of testing that goes into this as well to identify, like you said, toxin stuff, bacterial stuff, hormone stuff. It just doesn't seem like that's what every type of nutritionist would do. Maybe functional nutrition, but is that a differentiating factor as well?
Yeah, I think it's a differentiating factor from our standard Western medical model, which is looking to, avoid disease progression, whereas kind of the functional model is looking to do our best to regress and reverse and get people back to a state of homeostasis. So something I bring up in some of the public speaking that I do is, you cut your finger and it heals in 3 or 4 days all by itself. Like, how amazing is that? Yeah. The body just has this innate ability to heal itself. The thing is, if we're not giving it the right set of instructions, if we're not giving it the right fuel, if we're not giving it the right directions, it's not going to be able to do that successfully. It's going to try. It's going to try its hardest to build those building blocks, but they're not going to get built correctly. So until we give it the right set of instructions and balance that chemistry, we end up with states of disease. But if we give it that balance, all of a sudden it's successful in healing itself. So I think for so many people, there's this disconnect of the belief that the body has that innate ability. But then we think about the things that it does on a daily basis that we take totally for granted and realize quickly, like, okay, with the right set of tools, like our body can work for us instead of against us. Yeah.
So it's just a matter of getting those tools besides just the diet type stuff,
Absolutely. And I think you hit on it with the, I guess I would say, the detail of our intake and of our evaluation, that we're trying to understand all of the pieces that could be negatively influencing those instructions. So I'm actually really interested to hear your perception of your initial evaluation here in the clinic. So I'm going to go ahead and open the floor to you, and I'm really intrigued to hear what you have to say.
So I didn't know what to expect, right? Going into the office, is this going to be just a half-hour conversation or what it was going to be? And I think it ended up being maybe like an hour and 15, hour and 20 minute, like full-on exam. It went from where I thought we'd be on the other side of a desk from each other, just generally talking, to like you examining me. And I felt like there's like the medical aspect to it, you know, where it wasn't just the conversation about, hey, are you stressed? How many hours of sleep do you get a night? You know, what are you eating? It was just all kinds of questions. One thing that kind of came up, and it still strikes me, I was telling my wife about it, it was just the idea that I had my gallbladder removed in an accident years ago. And it's like they just take the gallbladder, but they don't ever say, hey, like, these are some of the things that you might have to deal with now that you have the gallbladder. And so we talked about that, and we identified how that might affect my system. And there's still things to determine, but like, you know, we kind of dug into that a little bit. And yeah, you're looking at the color of my skin and the eyes, and, you know, there's all this bacteria conversations that we had. So it was way more in depth than I thought it would. And I walked away from that meeting thinking like, Allison knows her stuff. And, you know, not that I'm like, I don't know the people that you see, but it's not like I'm like sickly, but I'm at this point where I just want to be better. Like, I want to just lose weight. I want to feel good. You know, I'm 41 years old. Like, I felt leaving that appointment with you that like, we are going to put together a plan to feel better moving forward, you know, and not because I'm miserable and dying and all that stuff, but it's just like, life's short. Like, I want to feel good. And this is a great opportunity to feel good. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So I want to kind of explain to your audience what you were describing, what that exam that you're talking about. We call it the nutritional physical exam, nutritional physical exam, or NPE. And that's the majority or a huge chunk of my training, aside from the in-depth understanding of biochemical processes in the body and nutrients involvement in those. The body produces these very specific physical manifestations when it comes to hormonal imbalance, nutritional deficiency, disease. So I'll give you like a simple example that I give a lot. If you pull down your lower eyelid in the lower cerebral conjunctiva, it should be like pretty bright red in there, like pretty stop sign red in there. That's a good, healthy, happy cerebral conjunctiva. Yeah. But if it's kind of pale pink, you know, we might want to be looking at iron. If it's like yellow, pale white, we might want to be looking at folate. Or is that getting where it needs to go? If we see a lot of breaking of the capillaries or kind of frothiness down there, like, we might want to be thinking about bacteria, what's going on there. And that's just one of roughly 2,000 points that I'm looking at head to toe, along with neurological testing, along with kind of asking some environmental exposure questions. So I get a pretty good sense pretty quickly of where I need to be looking lab work wise to better understand what's going on internally. And I hear a lot from patients, you know, kind of in shock. You know, my doctor hasn't looked at me in this way. And I want to set a precedent. Like, it's two very different training styles. Right? Mm-hmm. Like, if somebody gets hit by a bus, or somebody's in a serious crisis or having a heart attack, like, I can do nothing about it. Whereas what I'm trained to do is really look at digestion, absorption, the place in the body where we obtain fuel for every other reaction. So anything from thinking, breathing, blinking, walking, all of that requires nutrition. Mm-hmm. The greatest energetic pull in your entire body, day in and day out, no matter how like active you are, is digestion. Mm-hmm. And we know that over 90% of disease originates in the gastrointestinal tract due to maldigestion, malabsorption, bacterial issues, permeability issues. Our entire immune system is cultivated in the gastrointestinal tract. So every autoimmune disease is stemming out of the GI.
It's so interesting to hear, you know, too. And like, how many people deal with general discomfort in their digestive system? I mean, I feel like I've had it for 20 years to some degree, you know, and I feel like there's so many other people that are dealing with digestion issues. You know, it's almost like anyone could benefit from talking to you.
I so appreciate that. And I don't think you're wrong. I think we as a society, unfortunately, have normalized a lot of symptoms and just said, well, that's a you problem, including painful digestion. Like, digestion should be a seamless process. Like, you shouldn't know what's going on. You should just, you know, eat something, enjoy it, move on through. It should pass through you. We're good to go. There should be no discomfort all the way through the process. And yet we have acid reflux, we have IBS, we have Crohn's, we have ulcerative colitis, we have constipation, we have diarrhea. like, and we've normalized these symptoms and say like, take some Pepto-Bismol and have a nice day.
Yeah.
Right.
As opposed to figuring out like why you're having that problem.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm going to go on like a tiny tangent here just because it's such a huge passion of mine. I think especially for women, we have so normalized menstrual pain or hormonal symptoms going through the lifespan, or we've so normalized these discomforts and just said like, oh, that's part of your monthly cycle. Here you go. Yeah. And it pains me. It frustrates me because that should be a seamless process as well. There should be no mood swings. There should be no pain. There should be no, taking your first day off work because you're that uncomfortable. There's a significant hormonal imbalance, and giving you a synthetic hormone in the form of birth control is not going to fix that problem. And yet that is the response that we are given, right? I have a real passion, I think, just from my own experience, and I guess like who I am as a person. I want to fix things. I don't want to just support it. I do think, don't get me wrong, I think there's times and places where pharmaceuticals are absolutely life-saving. I really do. And there are times and places where I think they're a nice supporting agent to get us from point A to point B, right? Mm-hmm. But them as a fix, that is not what they are. No. In a lot of cases, that is not what they are, and yet that's what we're using them to try and do, right? Mm-hmm. I like to get to the root of it and see if we can regress and reverse things. And I will say in this clinic, I feel like I should like knock on something. We're very successful in communication with the patient's physician or prescribing physician, weaning people off or totally removing pharmaceutical use, even when they come in on that cocktail of like, I think the most I've removed from someone is about 16 different pharmaceuticals, which is wild to me.
It's amazing. It really is amazing. Whenever I hear about someone that's able to get off pills that they've been taking for a long term because they've made healthy choices and healthy decisions and stuff, it's awesome. That must be super fulfilling on your end.
They're big wins. Like when I get to take someone's blood pressure and it's slightly low because they're on a beta blocker or whatever pharmaceutical. And I get to make that phone call to their clinician and say, hey, we've repetitively taken this blood pressure. It's a little low. Would you be open to lowering the dose or weaning them off? Mm-hmm. That patient then has a conversation in an office visit with their prescribing physician. Mm-hmm. And they come back and they say, yeah, my physician took me off that medication. Mm-hmm. And the blood pressure stays healthy, even off the pharmaceutical. Yeah. Those are the days that are worth more than gold to me. Yeah. That's why I do my job. That is the moment where I get to say like, yes, this is what I was put on this earth to do. And I'm so thankful that I get to be part of this person's journey, that I have found a passion that also gives me an income. Like that's great. Yeah. A lot of people don't get to do both. So I just feel so blessed and appreciative to have had, yes, a terrible experience where I was mentally and physically unwell that brought me here and gave me this passion, this thing in life that I couldn't imagine not doing.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. So to close the loop on working with you, or at least initially, when someone works with you, mm-hmm. they have this meeting, the way you described it and the way I talked about it as well, there's typically some type of tests to determine different things based on how that first meeting goes. And then mm-hmm. from there, you put a plan in place. And that's typically how it would go from there. And then maybe you see them for a period of time, but eventually the goal is to discharge them, as you said. Is that the normal cycle of working with you?
Absolutely. For the most part. So you have your initial evaluation. We do all the exams. We order all the lab work. We then meet for a second visit known as the report of findings. We typically don't have the results of lab work at that point. Mm-hmm. And I typically won't go over lab work at that visit, because what I'm presenting to you at that report of findings is essentially the next 3, 6, 9 months to a year of work that we'll be doing together. Mm-hmm. So for some people, seeing that all at once can be a lot. Like they're like looking at a year's worth of work on a piece of paper. But that being said, we go through it at the patient's pace. So whether we're meeting weekly or biweekly or monthly, whatever that might look like, until the patient reaches a point where they've obtained the education, the tools, the understanding to handle it themselves. And then I'm there kind of more as a supporting agent. I think the only, I guess I'd say, like standout that wouldn't quite meet that is hormone management. Mm-hmm. So I do a fair bit of hormone management in my clinic, both male and female. I work alongside Med Matrix. They have a couple of locations, but they are great in some of the bioidentical hormone pieces, and we work together. Yep. But when it comes to managing hormones, like I'll see a patient every 3 to 6 months just to do a reassessment. As something as simple as like a really stressful event can kind of tilt that off, or coming out of something stressful and being more relaxed can kind of start to tilt that off, or some environmental exposures can alter that. Dietary changes can alter that. So we want to just kind of keep an eye if they're using, a bioidentical hormone support. But other than that, yeah, most patients are discharged, happy, healthy. Like I said, I might get a hug and a Christmas card, or if they see me in public, say, hey, I'm still doing great. I've lost another 20 pounds. Or, I was at a business meeting this morning, and one of my patients having to walk in the door, and she had a really debilitating skin disorder where it was extremely painful for her. And it was dominantly on her hands, and she was losing use of her hands because of how debilitating this skin disorder was. And she was really sweet. She came right up to me this morning in this business meeting, and she's like, look at my hands. They're still clear. And that's really fulfilling. Like it's great.
How often is hormone issues a thing? That wasn't even on my radar before meeting with you, that there might be hormone issues that need to be addressed for anybody, not specifically me, but just anyone. That seems to be a big problem for people.
Excellent. Hormones, aside from the microbiome, and both talk to each other, is probably the most intricate, system in the human body. When we look at hormones, like I know we kind of all think like sex hormones, like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. But we also have to think of hunger and satiety hormones like leptin and ghrelin. We also have to think of sleep and wakeful hormones like cortisol, and our fight or flight hormones like epinephrine and norepinephrine. This is such a complex system. And each of these hormones interacts with what are called neurotransmitters. These are chemicals in the brain that make us think, do, act, be who we are. And they talk to each other. So if you mess with a hormone, you're probably going to mess with a neurotransmitter. So again, what goes on in the body is going to happen in the brain.
Yep.
So like there's huge talk in both Western and functional about insulin resistance. Insulin is a hormone, right? So hormone issues are a huge component of what I see. And I think especially post-COVID, we're seeing a couple of things. Just this overwhelming increase in stress for people, and understand that stress in the body is a hormone called cortisol. No. The body, to simplify, the body doesn't know the difference between physical stress, like I'm running 6 miles a day and I'm working out really hard. Emotional stress, like, oh my God, how am I going to pay my bills? And inflammatory stress, like there's damage to a tissue. No. Cortisol is produced across the board. And that comes from the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands kind of sit right above the kidneys. They have a triad relationship with the thyroid and our other sex hormone producing glands. So you mess with one, you mess with all three. And so when we have this high amount of stress, we've heard stress kills you. Yeah, it starts to impact other sex hormones pretty dramatically. And those hormones do so much more than just fertility. They can be neurologically protective. They can help with bone density. They can help with muscle mass. They can help, they initiate like hunger and satiety. All of these pieces are impacted by stress, right? And I'll touch on this. I won't dive too deep into it. That's a whole nother podcast for a whole nother day. But we have portions of the gut microbiome that are negatively, not portions, like the entirety of the gut microbiome is negatively impacted by stress. But there are portions of the microbiome, we'll take, for example, the estrobiome, that really dictate the processing and excretion appropriately of estrogen in both men and women. And if those bacteria aren't present or aren't present in meaningful amounts, or there's opportunistic overgrowth, all of a sudden this thing that was just happening in the gut is now dramatically impacting how we process and remove estrogen. And understand that high amounts of estrogen, can equate to weight gain and insulin resistance and all of these downstream side effects, if you will, when it's not appropriately removed from the body. So hormone issues, gut issues, they go hand in hand with each other. But if we're not attacking the root cause, which for a lot of people is chronic stress, then they're going to see me again in 2 years, right? So I also need to come at it and understand their life. Like, what does your life look like? How can we alleviate some of these stressors? How can we delegate some of these things that are making you feel overwhelmed? How can we give you tools like meditation, breath work, Reiki, mindset practices to alleviate that stress response? And then also alter the microbiome so that you can digest and absorb the nutrients to make the hormones, to make the chemicals in your brain that say you're calm, that say you're relaxed, that say everything's okay.
Yeah, it makes sense how they're all related. And we live in such a society where stress is just so prevalent in everyone's life. It's unfortunate. It just kind of is what it is, but we definitely have to find ways to manage it.
Yeah, I think we're in this environment that's really, it's kind of unprecedented. We as evolutionary beings have not caught up to the environment in which we live. We're designed to be outside, eating a highly diverse diet in nature, in contact with fungi, yeast, protozoa, all these different like critters that live in our microbiome and our skin biome and all of that. And yet we're inside all day. We're not getting any of those exposures. Yeah. And now I think especially post-pandemic, rightfully so, for some of our protection in a lot of ways, we're living in this hyper sterile environment that we are not designed for, right? We're designed to have this microbiome with diverse critters, if you will.
Yeah.
And we're living in an environment that just isn't conducive to our beings. And even our food environment is getting really interesting to me. If you go in the grocery store, half of what you see is not food. Yeah. It's chemical, right? Like the whole middle of the grocery store, none of that is coming from a tree. It's coming from an animal.
I've been told for a while to just stay on the perimeter of the grocery store and avoid those middle aisles.
Yeah, spot on.
But it's just unfortunate because that's just, been raised growing up, going up and down the aisles, picking up all stuff. It just seems like that's how it is in America.
Right. It's the social norm in which we've been placed. And then even the outer edges of the grocery store, unfortunately, we're in this really difficult spot where there's this beautiful population of people and we're trying to feed all of them. And we've depleted soil and we've depleted resources. So these foods are less nutrient dense than they used to be. So getting, iron from broccoli, if you look at broccoli from the early, I'm pulling
what is really, the iron content down? And
yeah. Like if you look at iron in broccoli from the early 2000s to now, I'm pulling from memory, so don't quote me here. It's like an eighth of what it used to be, which is wild.
That is wild.
So I find, and it's unfortunate, but it's a way to do it. I'm relying a little bit more heavily on supplementation than I think I've ever had to in my practice because our foods aren't quite as nutrient dense as they used to be. And we're really trying to compensate for this environment. And I think I want to touch on one more thing that you nailed. It seems to just be like what it is in America, right? We have these social norms and these cultures around food. We use it as reward. We use it as pleasure. We use it as entertainment. We use it as everything that it's not meant to be. It's meant to be a culture, a thing to be enjoyed with people. Yes, absolutely. But also a thing to fuel the body. And I think we're told and given a lot more chemical than food on a daily basis. And we live in this very, very fast-paced society. And you can't physically be in fight or flight, which is what most of us are in all day long, moving really quickly, and rest and digest. Like you can't physically digest food when you're in this fight or flight. And yet that's what we're trying to do all day long. And then we're being given foods that aren't real food, that we're struggling to digest and break down. And where they're nutrient poor foods, but calorically dense foods. And so we're just giving our bodies the wrong set of instructions, frankly, by no fault of our own. It's what is available to us.
Well, I mean, I think of the way everyone operates. It's easier to get that food in the middle of the grocery store. I mean, things are packaged a certain way, and there's obviously a bunch of preservatives and chemicals, but like we're always trying to like get all our work in and do stuff with our kids and do the, everything. And a lot of times, like preparing food, I imagine, is one of the things that gets left out, or you just try to get the thing that's the easiest thing to eat. And I think that leads to some of the problems with the food that we have as well.
Absolutely. Convenience factor. And that's something that I try to instill in my patients. And I'm all about family time and community time. And if you can spend some of that family time and community time cooking with each other, that's where we start to see mental, physical well-being, right? You're spending some of that time together in the kitchen, experiencing like a really healthy environment, both mentally and physically, kind of cooking together.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it comes down to like ease and convenience, which I totally understand. Like I'm a human, I get that.
Yeah.
But when you are given an understanding of how simple it can be to prepare 2 or 3 nights worth of meals for a family that are healthy and wholesome, that meet the set of quote unquote like set of instructions for your body.
Yeah.
It's a relatively easy switch. You just have to be willing to do that work.
It does. It seems that way. Like despite all the things I just said, the ease and the convenience and the way things are set up for us, I think the way you combat that is with some education. And that is something that you provide for your clients through the process that you do. It just takes knowing and being told how to do things differently, and then you can implement from there. So
yeah, I look at it. Cool. I look at it as like a sign of respect to your body. Like it's. So I think we always think of discipline as like a negative thing. Like we discipline our children, we discipline our pets or whatever, and we think of it like really negative. Discipline is the most and the greatest sign of self-love you can give. The discipline to go to the gym every day, self-love. The discipline to eat appropriately for your body versus grabbing that pint of ice cream out of the freezer, self-love.
It's kind of funny. You just reminded me of something. I just met someone for lunch, and trying to eat out at restaurants can be hard, and eating healthy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what I got, I thought was like moderately healthy, just some fairly plain like tacos. And there wasn't much to it, but it came with fries, and these fries just sat in my face, and I had to like not eat them. The discipline to not eat. I didn't touch them, but it's not easy, because like everywhere you go, that's what's being put in front of you all the time. So, discipline can be challenging, but I like how you put that. It's a great sign of self-love.
Well, A, I want to applaud you, like nice work, but B, I totally agree with you, and I think if we look at the marketing of food, which again, a whole nother podcast for a whole nother day. Like, have you ever seen a sad ice cream commercial?
Yeah, no.
No.
Fun to have ice cream.
Right? We associate pleasure and joy and happiness with these relatively unhealthy choices, these non-disciplined, non-self-loving choices. So I think, something we as a society might need to think about and work on is the definition of our self-care and the definition of our self-love.
Love it. All right. So wrapping up here, you are still taking on clients, correct?
I am. What's
the best way for people to find you, get in touch with you, and then go from there?
Absolutely. So Immortalata.com, that's IMMORTALATA.com. Yes. You can book a discovery call either in person or over the phone. That's a great way. It's kind of a nice little interview process for me and for the new patient to make sure that I am the optimal clinician to be caring for them. And if I'm not, I make it a priority to find somebody who is. But 9 times out of 10, we can help here. I am constantly taking new clients just because I'm constantly discharging clients because they have reached their goal, their level of success, their level of wellness that they are looking to obtain. So Immortalata.com is a great place to go. You can also call the clinic at 603-733-9369. You can also email immortalatanutrition@gmail.com. All three of those are great. I also have a secondary location in Falmouth within Meg & Co. Medical Aesthetics, and I'm there Fridays from 9 to 1 taking free discovery consults. We do ask that people call to schedule those ahead of time. It does book up really quickly. I always feel terrible when there's like a waiting line by the time it's like 2:00 and I was supposed to be out of there an hour ago. But totally fine. We try and get everybody seen. Right now, where we are, just to kind of set a precedent for people, that discovery call is kind of step one. And then your initial evaluation, that first visit that we've talked about throughout this podcast is your step two. Usually we're booking 3 to 4 weeks out for initial evaluation. So I just kind of like to set that precedent there. But we can usually get you in for a discovery call within 1 to 2 weeks. We want to get the process started quickly and easily for you. And again, that discovery call is totally free. It's really just to see and make sure that we can help you or guide you to somebody who can.
Love it. And I'll be sure to share that stuff in the description as well and on social media throughout the week and the time that I post about the podcast. So, hey, I want to thank you for coming on. That was awesome conversation. I felt like we could have went a lot longer, but it was awesome. So thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you so much for hearing what I have to say. I know the functional approach is really like an alternative medicine, a complementary alternative medicine. And I think, we talked a lot about the Western medicine model and there's some real pros to it. But I think for those who are really looking to get to the root of what's going on, functional nutrition is a great place to start. So I'd love to work with individuals. I'm clearly passionate about what I do, but thank you so much for your time. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I truly appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much. We will be in touch.
All right. Take care. Stay well.